Welcome. This is a relatively short video where I wanted to go over something from chapters 2 and 3 of the textbook, kind of in my own way with a different example. This kind of highlights the difference between absolute advantage and comparative advantage in a way that isn't done in the textbook in chapter 3. So I am going to review production possibilities just in a couple of slides, but then I'm going to get to absolute advantage and comparative advantage and give you an example of each and see how, and so you can see a little bit more clearly how that works. It never hurts to have extra examples with some of these concepts. And I think comparative advantage, absolute advantage, these are very central key concepts to understanding basic economic reasoning. So just to review, right? Production possibilities. This is the example I talked about with pizzas and robots. This is from a different textbook that I used to use. All right. And so the idea is points inside the production possibilities frontier are attainable. Points on the production possibilities frontier are efficient. They're attainable, but they're also efficient. Points outside the production possibilities frontier are unattainable. You also have the way this one is drawn, it's not a straight line, it actually curves out. And when it curves out, that means that you have increasing opportunity costs. That is, in this example, right? As this economy goes from producing nothing but robots to producing more and more pizzas, every time they produce an extra 100,000 pizzas, they give up more robots than they did before. So they have increasing opportunity costs as they produce more and more pizzas. And the same thing works, right? So that works going this way as they produce more pizzas, but it also works as they go this way. As they produce more and more robots, they have to give up more in terms of pizzas. What is economic growth? It's when the production possibilities frontier shifts out. Now, what the textbook talks about, but it wasn't really clear. They didn't really get into this in those slides, but this is something I think that actually comes up in the homework, so I wanted to address it, is what happens if there's a shift in the production technology for only one of the goods, only one of the possibilities here, okay? So this is saying, suppose there's an improvement in robot production technology, something that improves in technology that only applies to producing robots. Then the increase in the production possibilities frontier is going to look like this. So if the society produces nothing but pizzas, it doesn't matter that robotic technology improved. But any combination, right? As long as they're anywhere on their production possibility that where they're producing some robots, they're going to see an increase in production possibilities. Same thing. What if there's some technology shift, some technology improvement in pizza ovens? If that would only make you able to produce more pizzas, but what that means is at any point, right? As long as you're not producing nothing but robots, at any point where you're producing some pizzas and some robots, right? You're going to see greater possibilities. So let's get to an example of first absolute advantage, and then we'll turn it into a comparative advantage example. So suppose you have two people who are shipwrecked on a desert island. Okay, so you have this desert island, and maybe it's some people on a deep sea fishing trip, and two people, maybe there were only a few people on that boat, and two of them survive. All right, one of them washes up on this side of the island, the other one washes up on this side of the island. And somewhere in the middle of the island here is a freshwater spring. Okay, so they set up camp here, they spell out help with sticks, right? SOS. Maybe they have a flare gun from the wreckage, right? The idea is each one of them thinks they're alone on the island, but they are doing the same thing. They're primarily engaged in two activities. All right. So, yes, they care about getting rescued, and yes, they had to build some sort of shelter for themselves, but each one of them is spending a lot of time and effort going into the interior of the island to gather fresh water, because you can't drink this water from the ocean, right? That's no good. That'll make you sick. So they have to travel in here to get the fresh water. They gather the fresh water, they bring it back to their camp here, and they spend a lot of time here catching fish to eat. So the idea is, this is a crude example where you have these two individuals instead of two countries like we were talking about in the textbook example, two individuals going back and forth, gathering water and catching fish. So the idea is there's two kinds of production going on here: gathering water and catching fish. So one of the people who washed up, he's the fisherman. I'm going to call him F. All right. He was a professional fisherman, and that's why he was on this deep sea fishing expedition. He was there to kind of show the guests on the boat how to fish. And the other one, let's say, is a superstar professional athlete, maybe an NFL running back. All right. And so we're going to call him the jock. All right. So we have the fisherman and the jock. And so we can look at their production possibilities. So if the jock did nothing but catch fish, he could catch 30 fish a week. And if he did nothing but gather water, he could gather 90 liters of water a week. And what I did was I just made the fisherman the opposite in terms of his production possibilities. He's really good at catching fish. So if he did nothing but catch fish, he could catch 90 fish a week, but he's not so good at getting the water. All right. If he did nothing but gather water, he could only gather 30 liters of water a week. Pretty intuitive, right? Why the fisherman would be good at catching fish and why the jock would be good at getting water, right? He's larger, he's stronger, he can run really fast, right? So he's able to bring lots of water back very easily. Whereas the fisherman can't carry as much water in each trip, and he can't make his trips as fast as the jock does. So the jock is more productive at gathering water, which means the jock has an absolute advantage in getting water, and the fisherman is more productive at catching fish in absolute terms. So the fisherman has an absolute advantage in catching fish. So let's talk about what happens if they're being self-sufficient, right? They're each on opposite sides of the island. I put my hands out of the frame, sorry, right? Each one is on an opposite side of the island, like I showed, right? The jock is all the way over here, and the fisherman is all the way over here. Okay? So each one doesn't know the other one exists. So they think, look, I'm by myself on this desert island. I have to survive until I get rescued. That means I have to spend some of my time getting water and I have to spend some of my time catching fish. So we suppose, for the sake of argument, they pick some point in the middle of their production possibilities that allows them to survive, that allows them to have enough fish to eat and enough water to drink. And for the jock, because of the trade-offs he faces and because he's so good at getting water, what that means is he picks a point in the middle of his production possibilities where he's catching enough fish to get by, 19 fish a week. And we're not talking about marlins here. We're talking about relatively small fish. So he's got enough to eat, and he's also got enough water. And for the fisherman, he doesn't quite have as much water as the jock does. He only has 19 liters of water a week. That's kind of just enough for him to get by, but he's catching 33 fish a week, and that's plenty for him. Okay, so the idea is each of them is self-sufficient on their own outside the island. Well, we can talk about what that is in total. The total island production is 52 liters of water a week and 52 fish a week, right? You just add 33 liters of water that the jock is gathering to the 19 liters of water that the fisherman is gathering. That's 52. And the 19 fish that the jock catches every week to the 33 fish that the fisherman catches every week. And that's 52. So it's a very nice, clean example, right? There's 52 liters of water and 52 fish being produced on this island. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's mostly being gathered, but it's being produced on this island. It's very low-tech production, taking some sort of container and carrying water back and forth and catching fish. Now, let's say one day, let me go back to the picture of the island, right? Let's say one day they happen to be gathering water near the same spot at the same time, and they realize they're not alone. So the jock looks at the fisherman and thinks to himself, wow, this guy looks pretty well fed, right? Makes sense. He's a fisherman. Ooh, I bet he's doing all right catching fish. And the fisherman looks at how much water the jock is carrying, and he's very impressed. And they have the idea. They say, hey, not only is it good not to be alone on this island and have someone to talk to aside from a volleyball, it's nice to be able to be here with someone who's better at something than I am, right? For the fisherman to say, wait, this jock is really good at getting water. And for the jock to say, wait, the fisherman's really good at catching fish. And so it really just occurs to them pretty easily that it makes sense to specialize. It makes sense to have the jock specialize where he's most productive, have the jock gather all the water for both of them, and have the fisherman catch all the fish for both of them. And when they do that, the jock ends up at this point on his production possibilities where he's doing nothing but gathering water, and he gathers 90 liters of water a week. And the fisherman is catching 90 fish a week. So their total output with specialization is 90 units of water and 90 fish every week. And this is up from 52, right? So it's 90 minus 52 for both of them, right? For both fish and water, which means, what is that, Miller? 38. Part of my brain that does arithmetic stalled for a moment. All right. So that's 38 more liters of water a week, 38 more fish than they were producing when they were on their own, producing in the middle of their production possibilities. So specialization, especially when it's based on absolute advantage like this, can really make a difference in how much total production there is. Okay. So now there's this idea that comes up, and the textbook sort of talked about this, but this is an important thing to think about is, okay, well, then what are the terms of trade, right? Because at the end of a week, they probably wouldn't do this every week. They'd probably do this every day, right? But at the end of it, right, if you think about what's going on every week, right, the jock has 90 units of water that he's gathered, and the fisherman has 90 fish that he's caught. How do they split them up? They could just not negotiate, right, and split them up 50-50. Each one gets 45 liters of water. Each one gets 45 fish, and they're better off than they were before. If you remember, right, when they were at point C, I guess I'll go back to where I have point C circled, right? 45 liters of water is way more than the jock had on his own, and 45 fish is way more than he had on his own. Same for the fisherman, right? So they're definitely better off if they just split it down the middle. But there's other possibilities, right? So there are many terms of trade that could work in this example. So they could trade one fish for 1 unit of water. So the jock trades 45 liters of water for 45 fish, and they each have 45 and 45. That could work. Or the thing is, even if the terms of trade were 1 liter of water for 2 fish, this could work. So for example, the jock could trade away, he could trade away 50 liters of water. Wait, would he want to trade 50? No. He could trade 25 liters of water for 50 fish. All right. So if the jock, remember, the jock has 90 liters of water, the fisherman has 90 fish. So what if the jock says, I'm going to take 40 of my liters of water, or not 40, excuse me, I'm going to take 30 of my liters of water. 30? I'll make it, what did I say before? 25. I'll take 25 works, right? I take 25 of my liters of water and I trade them away for 50 fish, right? That's 1 for 2. Even that trade makes them both better off. That's a pretty extreme, right, terms of trade, right? You're saying, what, 1 liter of water is worth 2 fish? Well, if that's what works for them, because maybe that allows the jock to have more fish, right? Maybe he needs to eat more because he's bigger and he's the one traveling so much back and forth across the island. Whatever, right? The point is they can come to a negotiation that works. So think about that. If the jock trades away 25 liters of water, that leaves him with 55. No, that leaves him with 65. That leaves him with 65 water. That leaves the jock with 65 liters of water. I'm going to put the jock here and the fisherman here. And he trades that 25 liters of water for 50 fish. And so now he has 65 liters of water and 50 fish. The jock is doing great under that term of trade, right? 1 unit of water for 2 fish. Well, the fisherman, though, has the 25 liters of water that the jock gave him, and he is still left with 40 fish. And if you go back here, right, you see that the fisherman went from 19 liters of water to 25 liters of water, and he went from 33 fish to 40 fish. So he's better off than he was. And obviously the jock is way better off because he went from 33 liters of water to 65 liters of water. I don't know what he's going to do with all that water. He's maybe even taking showers. That's so much water. And he goes from 19 fish to 50 fish. So that's the idea, is they end up doing a lot better. Now, let's talk about comparative advantage. What would make this comparative advantage instead of just absolute advantage? I said in the lecture on chapter 3, if you have an absolute advantage, you automatically have the comparative advantage, right? But what if you only have comparative advantage? What if one of these two people is not more productive than the other one at anything? What if they merely have a lower opportunity cost of production, but they're not actually absolutely more productive at catching fish or gathering water? So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the island and I'm going to erase the fisherman. Where's my pen? Here it is. I need to go to an eraser. All right, let's erase the fisherman here. Okay. Go back and get my pen. All right. So let's say, I don't know, they're stuck on this island for so long that the fisherman eventually gets old and dies. I don't know, or he's eaten by a shark. I don't know, something. It could be dramatic or it could be very boring. But the point is, suppose the fisherman's not here. And so one day, the jock is back to being self-sufficient if the fisherman dies, right? And so suppose the jock is back to being self-sufficient. He's gathering his own water and he's catching his own fish. And one day, as he is out here trying to catch fish, not doing as good a job as the fisherman would do, but he's catching enough fish, he sees a small plane flying by. And when he sees that small plane, he gets all excited. He lights a signal fire. He starts waving his arms and yelling. And he gets the flare gun that he has from the wreckage of the boat, and he fires it into the air. And as soon as he fires it in the air, he sees that plane start to turn toward him, and he gets all excited. But as that plane turns toward him, that flare actually hits the plane, and the plane starts bobbing and weaving and smoking. And eventually, he sees the plane go into a dive, and he sees someone jump out, and a parachute come down. The plane crashes into the water. And as that parachute drifts down, he sees someone land in the water, cut loose the parachute, and start swimming awkwardly towards the shore. And who washes up on the shore? Let's say they wash up over on the other side of the island. All right. The jock runs over to the other side of the island. And who does he discover there? He discovers a nerd. And the jock says, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I was just trying to get your attention. But you turned, it just happened. You turned at just the wrong moment and you turned right into the flare. And I'm so sorry, but I hope you're okay." And the nerd says, "I'm okay. Frankly, I have no idea what happened. There must have been something wrong with the plane." And the jock said, "Yeah, that's the ticket." Well, what does this mean for them? Well, the jock shows the nerd through the ropes. He shows him how to survive on the island, how to catch fish, how to gather water. And here's what they observe. They observe that when the nerd does nothing but catch fish, he is really not good at it. He can only catch 15 fish a week. That's not very good. So the jock shows the nerd how to gather water, and the nerd is not so bad at getting water, but even when the nerd spends all his time getting water, he's only gathering 60 liters of water a week. So he's not nearly as productive as the jock is at getting water, but he's also not as productive as the jock is when it comes to catching fish. So the jock, because he hasn't studied economics yet, says, "Well, I think the best thing for us is just we each do both. You catch your own fish and get your own water, and I catch my own fish and get my own water. Because if I rely on you to catch fish, we won't have enough to eat. And if I rely on you to gather water, we probably won't have enough water to drink." But if the jock makes that conclusion, it turns out he's going to be wrong. This is a case of comparative advantage. Although the jock has an absolute advantage over the nerd in both getting water and catching fish, the nerd actually does have a comparative advantage here. And that's because the nerd's opportunity cost of getting water is lower than the jock's. The nerd is 2/3 as productive as the jock is in getting water, but he's only half as productive as the jock is in catching fish. For the nerd, what we see here, right, is that for every fish the nerd catches, it costs him 4 liters of water. But for the jock, every fish he catches costs him 3 liters of water. So the jock has a lower opportunity cost of catching fish than the nerd does, and the nerd has a lower opportunity cost of gathering water than the jock does. So there is actually a comparative advantage here. And so what we see is that's what they would be when they were self-sufficient. This would be the jock would have 33 and the nerd would have 24. So total water would be 33 plus 24, 57. I think I have it on the next slide, but I want to write it down here next to the table. And total fish would be 19 caught by the jock, 9 caught by the nerds. So fish would be 28. Okay. That's how much they would produce if they were trying to be self-sufficient. But if they specialized based on comparative advantage, then the nerd would gather water, and water would instead be 60. So they would have more total water available to them both. And the jock would specialize in catching fish, and that would go to 30. So there would actually be more fish and more water. And that surplus, right, the extra water and the extra fish could be split between them somehow, so that the jock maybe has, instead of 33 liters of water that he would be able to get on his own, maybe he has 34 liters of water or 35 liters of water. And the nerd is able to have more fish than he might have. So maybe the jock gets 35 liters of water. So the nerd trades away 35 liters of water. He trades 35 liters of water that he produced. Remember, he produced 60, trades away 35, keeps 25 for himself. So he still is better off in terms of water. He trades those 35 liters of water for 10 fish. Now the nerd has 10 fish a week, which maybe makes all the difference. And the jock would have 20 fish a week. So he would still have more fish than otherwise. So there's still terms of trade that could work. And let me figure that out. 35 for 10, that's trading 3.5 liters of water for every fish. That's a term of trade that could work and make them both better off. That's just me showing what happens with specialization. Total output becomes 60 units of water and 30 fish. And like I said, there are multiple possibilities, although within a narrower range than with the absolute advantage example. But one possibility is trading one fish for 3.5 units of water. The nerd could then trade 35 liters of water, like I suggested before, to the jock in exchange for 10 fish. And after that trade, the nerd would have 25 liters of water left, and he'd have 10 fish, which is better off than he was before. The jock would have 35 liters of water and 20 fish, and he's better off than he was before. So let's talk about some other types of examples of comparative advantage. So LeBron James is a big guy. He's a strong guy. He can probably move a refrigerator by himself. All right. It still makes sense that when he moves, that he would hire movers. They may not be as big and strong as he is. They may not be as fit as he is, but it still makes sense for him to hire movers. Why? Because the opportunity cost of his time is so high, right? If he's missing practices, or God forbid, if he's missing a game, right? He's losing a lot of income. It's a high cost to him, both in terms of income and reputation and all kinds of other things. It doesn't make sense for him, with the high opportunity cost of his time, to move his own furniture, even though he may have an absolute advantage. So that's a case where he has a comparative advantage, but not an absolute advantage. Suppose you have a CEO, and she's very organized and she types really well, And she's a great writer. She writes the best memos. Does it make sense for her to do all of her own typing and photocopying and sending out these mass emails and drafting these memos? Or does it make sense for the CEO to hire an assistant who isn't as productive absolutely as she is, but who has a comparative advantage in those tasks? And that's the idea. The idea is that the opportunity cost of the CEO's time for those tasks is higher than the person she would hire as an assistant. And then this applies obviously to international trade, like we talked about in the Chapter 3 lecture. Smaller countries often don't have as much land, and so therefore they're not as absolutely productive as a large country like Canada or the United States, right? So there are countries with lots of large amounts of land, fertile land. You can grow a lot of corn in the United States, and the United States does grow a lot of corn, but you could also grow a lot of soybeans. You could grow a lot of avocados. You could grow a lot of bell peppers. You could grow a lot of tomatoes. You could grow a lot of pretty much anything in the United States. And yet the United States specializes in growing some crops, but not in others. For example, most of our avocados come from Mexico or Guatemala and other countries. Why would we import those or import most of them instead of growing most of them here? And the answer is the opportunity cost of that productive land is high for growing avocados, but relatively low for growing corn. So that means a country like Mexico or a country like Chile might have a comparative advantage, even when they don't have an absolute advantage for growing certain types of crops. All right, let me stop there. And I want to thank you for watching this video with these extra examples, but hopefully that makes it even more clear. I don't want to say clears it up. Maybe you got it on the first video, right? But I hope that makes it even more clear what's going on, the difference between absolute advantage and comparative advantage. I want to thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.